I'm Emily Davis, product manager on the directory. From the manufacturer standpoint, we wanted to be able to give them tools to be able to manage their data and get the information in so that we can transfer it into the regulatory agencies. So they're able to do that by loading through a multiple upload function, and then they're also able to download all of the units in their directory and do any edits necessary and then proceed to upload. They have a dashboard where they're able to check the acceptance of their uploads. And then on that dashboard, any failed records that did not pass validations can be downloaded, adjusted, and then reloaded so they can pass validations. We have 3 download functions that they can download all of their records across all of their model statuses so they can perform any kind of model data edit that they need to do. We also have OEMs that are set up to only have access to the directory. So when we have an OEM and PBM relationship, what we'll do is the OEM is then responsible for working with that PBM to create the data in the directory and upload it for them. And we do have a handful of rules set for ensuring that there's not a mismatch of data while models are going through a review process. So when a manufacturer is submitting models for Energy Star review, a system will place a lock on it, so that way once they're submitted, and as the engineer is reviewing it and HRI is submitting to EPA, we don't have any chance of any data getting edited on the directory side and then published incorrectly on EPA side. And then each branded version of a model is a separate record. So we will have an instance where the manufacturer can have the exact same model for 5 different brands. And that in the system is viewed at as 5 separate records. And then we do have a handful of programs that need to have test reports submitted with them for engineer review and approval. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we do work with regulatory agencies to submit on our manufacturer's behalf. There are program-specific requirements related to some of these regulatory agencies. So for DOE, a handful of our programs do require a PDF test report excuse me, to be submitted in order for them to successfully pass DOE validations. We do submit to DOE overnight so that we can quickly get information over to the agency and then publish the information. Before any regulated program has a model can be published, we have to send it to DOE in order for it to pass validations and to be published on our site. And when we work with Energy Star, the manufacturers upload records, mark it as an Energy Star submittal, and then they submit the necessary paperwork. And then we have a process where those models will flow through an approval process. Now for NRCan and CEC, it's as simple as manufacturers marking those models either sold in California or Canada. And then HRI has a monthly process where we'll submit to those agencies and they'll be published on the applicable sites. So as I'm going through this, it's going to be a logical flow of how a manufacturer would come in and manage their records. So it's going to be pretty indicative of how they would come in and initially set data up. Now, regardless of a program, the manufacturer is always going to have a brand set up in the system before they can enter any records. Okay, so we will log in as a manufacturer from our homepage. So as I was saying, anytime a manufacturer wants to enter any model, they're going to have to enter a brand first. And the reason for that being is what our system does is when it pulls down the template, it is looking specifically into the back end to ensure that the licensee has brand set up, and it will pull it into that template. And that's in order to create consistency. And if you have multiple users that are entering brands for a particular model, one is going to be in all caps versus one is in just the first letter is capitalized. Everything is pulling from the database. So as a licensee, you're going to pull whichever company name is going to be a model that you're going to be entering. And then this particular manufacturer is associated with every single program we have. This is not necessarily going to be a real life example, but for training purposes, this is what's going to work best. So we'll select our program. I'm going to be demoing AHAU, because it is a program that does not have a lot of fields, so it is easier to step through during a live demo. And then as an OEM or as a PBM, depending on how you're entering it. And then you'll see that I've already entered these brands. It'll show you who created it, when it was created, and then what the brands are. I'm actually going to show creating a PBM brand, because that way you can see how the system correlates OEM versus PBM. So this particular licensee is set up as a PBM to the company that this manufacturer has permissions for. And since a PBM manufacturer does not have permissions to the system, it would be the manufacturer that is the OEM that would be responsible. So as you are entering this, when you go to create it, it is going to ask that you have permissions to use it. So this language is going to cover the fact that the manufacturer is agreeing that they do in fact have permissions to use this brand, and it is located in their agreement package. So they do have to accept that term before we will accept that brand into the directory. Now, manufacturer name. So this falls under the category of this is going to be a feature that is not going to be required across all manufacturers. Manufacturer name is used for regulatory reporting. It's how DOE will recognize a particular company and all of the models under it. So if a program is not regulated by DOE, it's not going to require that a manufacturer name needs to be created. So we'll do this and choose the regulated program. And this one, they don't have to necessarily agree to a language. Now, most of the time, manufacturers will have a manufacturer name that is an exact replica of their company name. It can be different. It doesn't have to be the exact same. It's up to the manufacturer to decide if they want to report as their legal entity or if they want to report under a different name. Now, once the manufacturer has their brand name in the system and their manufacturer name, if applicable, they can add models. And so to do that, they would come to the Managed Directory Records, and we'll start with uploading new models. And this is where they'll differentiate if they're an OEM or a PBM. They'll input their company name. So company and licensee are used synonymously in the directory. Licensee is going to be the same as the company and vice versa. So as soon as they choose their company and their login location and their program, they can hit next. And I do want to mention that the reason we capture the login location is for some of our bigger companies that can have multiple locations, they won't necessarily want users from each location having permissions across the board. And so what the directory does is we set up location, we set up permissions at the login location level. So we can have 5 users, and then only 3 of those have permissions in location B, and the other 2 have permissions in location C. Okay, so now we're going to download the model data template, and this is going to allow the manufacturer to input their data into a template that the directory can then validate. And I'll show you the blank template here, and what I do have is a template I've already populated, but this pulls in the brands that I've already created. And so it goes back to when I said originally, brands have to be entered into the directory before manufacturers can upload any models. And that's because this template has gone into the back end and pulled what we have for that manufacturer. And then depending on the program, this could be little columns, or we have some programs that can have over 200 columns. And so regardless of how large the template is, we're always going to have the field name in the first row, the requirements for that field in the second row, and the requirement scenarios in the third row. So required or optional, we'll have some conditionally required fields. For example, this is a good one. If the BMG is greater or equal to 17, it's required, otherwise it's not required. So regardless of the program or the template size, that is how they're all going to be broken down. Okay, and so what I'm going to do now is go to my computer and pull up the file that has already been completed. Now you'll notice that the file name of this was the program, OEM, and then underscore. Now when you download a template, this is what it's going to say, the program, underscore OEM or PBM, and then template. Anything after the underscore of OEM or PBM can be changed. However, the file name cannot be altered outside of the first two sections. And the reason for that being is we have pre-validations set up in the directory that are making sure that based on the template, it's looking at the correct program table for validations. And again, based on if it's an OEM or PBM, it's also looking at those specific validations to proceed. So once the manufacturer uploads it, they're going to get their specific batch number right here in the confirmation number. It's important to understand that this confirmation message doesn't necessarily mean that the files have passed and are available in the directory. It means that the file has passed preliminary validations and is in queue to be uploaded, but the actual model data has to be validated in order to ensure that it matches the program requirements. And so what we can do now is go to that dashboard, go to the upload status, and check our batch. So the one that I just uploaded is still processing. And then what will happen is the manufacturer will get an email once it's finished processing, but the language in the email still directs them back to this dashboard because it's important for them to see if their files have passed. So for example, this is a successful upload. It was under the uploaded records file and there's one result, or if it's failed. This is a failed one. And what I'm going to do here is open up that failed template so we can see what happens when we have a model that's failed. And what's nice about this functionality is when a manufacturer opens this template, they're going to see the column and the reason that the model has failed. So there could be multiple error messages in this column B, or there could be one. And our error messages are set up to always be the column name first, followed by the reason it failed. And so when I created this, my equipment line name was only capitalized with the first letter. And the system requirements here say alphanumeric all caps. So what the manufacturer could do is then input this field in all caps, save it, and they can alter it however they like, and then they can go back through the multiple upload functionality and reprocess it, which is exactly what I did here. So once I edited it, I went back to the multiple upload functionality. So you go through here and then input all of the information again, and then I reloaded it. And then you can come back here and then see that once I successfully completed that information, it was able to successfully save the file. And then once you download that file, the manufacturer is going to be able to get their reference number. So not only will they able to be confirmed that it was successful by seeing it on their dashboard, they can also download that successful file to get the reference number for any documentation they need, or to provide it to the engineer if they need to discuss that particular record in detail. Now for the 3 reporting functions that I mentioned earlier, the view download OEM data is going to be the most comprehensive. It's going to include all of the OEM data that they have, so we'll use the AHU program again. Now for some manufacturers, they might be members of, or they might have permissions for multiple companies. And so there could be multiple companies in this dropdown if that is the case. So they have the permissions to be able to select all or just one particular one that they want to look at specifically. Same thing for brand. If they have multiple brands, they can select their results to either pull everything that they have in the database, or if they're looking for a particular line, they can parse that out here. All of our model statuses as well. So this is really the reporting function that is going to show the manufacturer every single thing that they could have in the database for this program. They have the options to view the results on screen or directly download. And once they download them onto the screen, they can then, of course, export them as well. But this is going to show them everything that they have in. And this is helpful because there are some times when a manufacturer thinks that a model has been uploaded and they don't see it either published or they don't see it in the view download OEM data, and it's turned out that it actually did not pass validation. So that's why we stress having those manufacturers look at their dashboard to confirm that the models did in fact pass validations. Now, if we have an instance where a manufacturer wants to look for PBM models, we could do the view download licensee data, or we can do the view download OEM PBM data. The view download licensee data is similar to the OEM, which I just showed you. However, it's going to ask if you want your OEM or your PBM. So it's a little more of a drill down than the OEM data, and it's also going to be focused on the ability to provide the information on PBM models. So it's drilling down specifically based off of licensee type. It's very specific to the licensee's login location. So this is more of a targeted report. I'm just going to go ahead and pull everything that this manufacturer could possibly have under this PBM relationship. And then in the OEM data, you saw me just move all of the fields over. If you're just looking for, let's just say you want to see if something's test locked, or if they want to see if something's test locked and their model status, they can create specific queries to not necessarily pull all of these fields over. What we found is that manufacturers will tend to just pull everything over and then view them on screen, see if it's a general idea of what they want, and do any necessary filtering within Excel itself. So again, they have the ability to export their results here. We do have the system set to export on a CSV, and that is because some of our programs, unitary small equipment specifically, can have millions of records. So in order to handle that data, we've pushed the system, regardless of the program, to export in CSV. We did want to make sure that we let the users know that depending on the program used, you could lose some of the models in your export, depending on the size of the export. So this verbiage here is just letting the manufacturer or the engineer, it's the same message for them, know that if they're downloading into Excel, that some of the rows could drop. So as this is thinking, it's going to download into a zip file, which you can then access the CSV. So this will have all of the columns that are located on the screen. And as you start to get more models throughout a program, you can throw a filter in here and then be able to go through the various forts. So it's going to, if you want to sort it by created date, you could do that, or who modified it. This is pulling everything that's in the database. You will notice, since we're looking at a PBM report, you're not seeing any of the specifics for these models. And that's because our PBM models are set to inherit information from OEMs, because it's basically the exact same physical model, it's just rebranded. And so if information on this particular model is needed, they'll have to locate the OEM reference number, which is over here, and then use that to cross-reference into the view download OEM data. So there'll have to be two reports that are used together to get that information. And from a higher level, manufacturers can also see the relationship of OEMs and PBMs. So if they need to see at a high level, not necessarily looking between two reports for model data, what PBM models are tied to OEM models, they can do that through this report. So they can filter through model status if they want to. I'll just go ahead and select all. So they can either pull PBM records related to OEM records or vice versa. So we'll do the first one, and we'll pull up our OEM company test license ID, and then export. And the reason we've pushed this functionality straight to export is that for our larger programs, we wanted to be able to quickly deliver a report, and building it on screen was starting to slow down the interface. So everything goes directly to an export now. So as we're looking here, we can see we have these two OEM records that are tied to these two PBM records. And so for a manufacturer that has permissions for multiple PBM companies and under one OEM company, this report could be helpful to see where they are in terms of model associations. And then we have an upload a PDF functionality here. And this particular function is going to be used for commercial programs that require a supplemental PDF to be submitted to DOE so it can pass validations, or if the program requires test reports to be submitted. And so what we'll do is go ahead. I'm not going to be able to pull full models for these because we don't have regulated models for this user, but we can step through the process. So it's going to be the manufacturer specifying which program, which company they're selecting it under, their login location, and then the PDF type. So we're looking at DOE submissions or private test reports that are required for some programs. And then in order to associate the PDF that they're uploading with the particular model, they would enter their reference numbers here. And what we found is that manufacturers tend to have a separate program that lists all of the reference numbers that they need to associate a PDF with, and they can copy and paste here. And once they have that here, they can then specify if they want to search across particular model statuses, if they want to display the information that they're looking for by model number or reference number, and then click search. And what the system is going to do is look at this field here for the reference numbers that have been input, and they will then select, the system will then display the models in this box. And the manufacturer can click which particular model has to be associated with that PDF, choose a file, and then upload it. And what I'll show you when I bounce over to the engineer functionality is that the engineers have a dashboard where they can see where these manufacturers have uploaded particular PDFs, whether it's a DOE file or a private test report. Now, for our unitary only program, we have what we call a Coil descriptor report. And I will walk through the interface. I'm not going to download it specifically because it's an extremely large amount of data and it takes a little bit to download. And so the functionality for this is set that we have ICMs, independent coil manufacturers, that need to know what's available for them to pair with. So what they can do is they can enter particular search criteria, and then they can pull what's published, so there's no proprietary information included in this report. They can then pull and see which models they want to pair their coils with, so it's easier for them to then turn around and enter information into the directory. Now, on the flip side, it also provides system manufacturers with a market view of what's happening. It provides visibility into what of their system records have been paired with coils, and just gets an idea of the landscape of the market for them. And again, as I mentioned earlier in the PowerPoint, we have our user guide that's available for the licensees. It goes through all of the functionality. There's step-by-step instructions. There's pictures that help them understand where they can go through different features, and they can also access their release notes. Now, I did want to mention that we do have 2 Energy Star functionalities right now in production. What we're going to do is, as we're rolling out the new functionality, we'll have a separate training session because we're working on retiring the original functionality that was released January of last year. So I'm not going to touch on how manufacturers load models into Energy Star approvals or how engineers will do that, but that will be handled in a separate session.